Mud climbed her nails as the crowd chant rose around her. Send her back where she came from. Madame Ebere's voice cut through it like a blade. She has shamed this house long enough, but before the elders could drag her away, a single voice silenced the entire courtyard. Stop! Every head turned. The prince had finally come to make his choice, and no one, not even Nneka, knew how far back this story truly began. In the village of Umuaku, where the iroko trees touched the sky and the river sang every morning before the cock could crow, there lived a girl named Nneka. She was not born into hardship. Her early years were wrapped in the warmth of her mother, Adaeze, a woman the elders called the Gentle One, for the kindness she poured into everyone she touched. Nneka would sit at her mother's feet beneath the Udara tree, learning songs older than the village itself, believing, as every child believes, that this happiness would last forever. But faith does not consult the heart of a child before it changes course. When Nneka was only 8 harvests old, a fever swept through Umuaku, the kind no herbalist could outrun. It took her mother in 7 days. The Udara tree still stood, but the woman who once sat beneath it was gone, and so it seemed was the sun itself. 2 villages away, a woman named Ebere had buried a sorrow of her own. Years before she ever set foot in Omuaku, she had carried her firstborn daughter, a child she named Adora, through a fever no different from the one that would later take Nneka's mother. Ebere prayed to every deity she knew. She walked to different healers with the child wrapped against her chest. Adora did not survive the fifth night. The villagers who knew Ebere before said grief did something to her that nothing could undo. It didn't just sadden her, it hardened her, the way fire hardens clay before it can ever soften again. When Nneka's father, Chief Okonkwo, came seeking a new wife 2 years after his own wife's passing, Ebere arrived in Umuaku already carrying a different child, Chioma, born after Adora's death. The daughter she swore she would protect from every wind that blew. People mistook Ebere's fierce love for Chioma as favorism. They did not know it was fear. Fear that loss would come again and take the only piece of her first daughter's memory she had left to hold. And in that fear, it became easier to see Nneka not as a grieving child like her own daughter had once been, but as a rival for the only kind of love Ebere still trusted herself to give. For a while, Chief Okonkwo's presence kept a fragile peace in the house. He doted on Nneka in the quiet hours when Ebere wasn't washing, slipping her kola nuts and old proverbs about her mother's strength. But 4 years into the marriage, a haunting accident in the forest beyond Omoako took him, as sudden as fever had taken 2 mothers before him. With no father left to soften the edges of the house, Ebere's fear hardened into something colder. Shoma was given the best wrapper, the warmest corner by the fire, the first taste of every meal. Nneka was given the broom, the firewood, the long walk to market before sunrise. The villagers noticed Umuaku was the kind of place where nothing stayed hidden for long, but few dared speak against a widow raising 2 daughters under one roof. She has her reasons, the elders would say, not knowing how true and how tragic those reasons were. Nneka grew up anyway. She grew kind in a house that gave her none. She grew strong by carrying more than her share, gentle by choosing patience over bitterness, and though no one around her seemed to notice, more beautiful by the season, the kind of beauty that comes from a spirit that refuses to break. Every morning began the same way. Nneka, the yard will not sweep itself. Ebere's voice cracked across the compound before the sun had even cleared the hills. Nneka rose from her mat in the smallest room of the house, the one closest to the goats, and began her chores before Shioma had even opened her eyes. She fetched water, pounded yam, mended clothes that were never hers to wear. At the market, traders who had known her mother slipped her an extra plantain or a kind word, and for a moment, Nneka remembered she was once a child who was loved. In the evenings, when the chores were finally done, she slipped away to the small garden behind the house, the one patch of soil her mother had planted years ago, and tended the few flowers that still grew there, stubborn and wild, exactly like her. It was Shioma who mentioned the garden to her mother, not out of cruelty exactly, just a passing comment about Nneka wasting time talking to flowers like a mad woman. But to Ebere, even this small joy looked like defiance. The next morning, before Nneka could rise, Ebere marched into the garden with a cutlass and tore every flower from the earth in front of the entire compound, in front of the market women passing by, in front of Shioma who said nothing. This house has no room for things that do not serve a purpose, Ebere said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, loud enough to make sure the humiliation would travel as far as her words could carry. Nneka stood frozen, watching the last piece of her mother she had left scattered across the dirt. She did not cry, not where Ebere could see. But something inside her, quiet and patient, began that morning to wait. You know what? Before we go any further, if this story is already sitting heavy on your chest the way it is sitting on mine, do me a small favor and hit the subscribe button right now, because I promise you, what happens next is going to make everything you just watched worth it. We are just getting started. The same season, a new trouble crept into Umuaku. One no broom could sweep away and no cutlass could cut down. The rains had not come, not that month, not the one before it. The river that once sang every morning grew quiet, then thin, then silent altogether. Wells that had fed the village for generations turned to cracked earth and dust. And as the dry season stretched longer than anyone could remember, the elders of Umuaku began to whisper of the only water source untouched by the drought. A stream no one in living memory had dared to visit, the forbidden stream of Ajokuta forest. The elders gathered beneath the ancient Odala tree at the center of Umuaku, faces drawn with worry. The stream in Ajokuta still flows, said Pa Eze, the oldest among them, but it has flowed untouched for 3 generations, since the spirits of the forest claim it as her own. Whoever disturbs those waters without permission do not return. Murmurs spread across the crowd. Children were pulled closer to their mothers. No one volunteered. Then Ebere stood, smoothing her wrapper with the calm of a woman who had already made her decision. My stepdaughter Nneka is young and strong, she announced, loud enough for the whole gathering to hear. She fears nothing, let her go. A heavy silence fell over the crowd. Some villagers looked away, ashamed to witness what they could not stop. Nneka, standing at the edge of the gathering with a water pot balanced on her hip, felt every eye turned towards her at once. She did not need to ask why she had been chosen. She already knew. It was never really about the water. That night, Nneka could not sleep. She sat by the small fire in her room, turning her mother's old wooden comb over in her hands, the only object Iberi had never managed to take from her. At dawn, she set out with an empty clay pot and a heart full of dread. The eyes of the village followed her all the way to Umuaku's edge. The path narrowed as she entered Ajokuta's forest, the trees growing taller and closer together, swallowing the sunlight until only thin gold threads of it touched the forest floor. Birds, she didn't recognize, called from branches she couldn't see. The deeper she walked, the more the silence seemed to listen back. She thought of turning around more than once, but she thought too of the dry wells, the cracked fields, the children of Umuaku going to bed thirsty, and she kept walking, repeating the same thing to herself like a prayer. I have survived worse than fear. After what felt like hours, the trees opened into a clearing unlike anything Nneka had ever seen. A stream, clear as glass, wound through moss-covered stones, glowing faintly silver under a canopy that let in just enough light to make the water shimmer. The air felt different here, warmer, watchful, alive in a way she couldn't explain. Leaves rustled overhead, though no wind moved them. She felt, rather than saw, that she was not entirely alone. Steadying her breath, Nneka knelt at the water's edge. "Forgive me," she whispered. "My people are thirsty. I mean no disrespect." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the rustling stilled, and the current seemed to slow, almost as if granting permission. It was then she noticed she wasn't alone after all. A young man stood across the clearing, dressed simply, a hunting bow slung across his back, watching her with an expression caught between surprise and quiet respect. "Most people run from this place before they reach the water," he said. "You didn't run." Nneka straightened, embarrassed to have been caught talking to a stream. "My village needs this water more than I need my dignity," she said. The stranger laughed, a warm sound, out of place in such a heavy forest. "Somadina," he said simply, leaving out the rest of his name, the rest of his title, the rest of everything that would have changed how she looked at him. "Nneka," she replied, filling her pot at last.